Good afternoon, and welcome to our New York Archives Magazine online speaker series. I'm Josie Madison, editor of New York Archives. Today, we are joined by speaker Lisa Amati, who will delve into the fascinating world of fossils and the legacy of Winifred Goldring, a pioneering paleontologist who shaped our understanding of prehistoric life and the fossil record. This session will be led by archivist Jamie Brinkman. Lisa Amati grew up in the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan. She always wanted to be a paleontologist and found her first trilobite while fossil hunting at around the age of 5. Lisa graduated from the University of Wyoming with a BS in geology in 1997. For her MS, Lisa attended Kent State University, where she studied Triassic age, 230 million years old, lobster fossils from British Columbia. She then spent 5 years at the University of Oklahoma working on late Ordovician trilobites from Oklahoma, Missouri, and New York. After graduating with her PhD in 2004, Lisa worked as a professor at SUNY Potsdam, teaching a broad range of undergraduate courses from paleontology to planetary geology. Her research focuses on the ecology and evolutionary relationships of late Ordovician trilobites from New York, Ontario, and Quebec. Lisa was appointed as the New York State Paleontologist in June 2015 and continues to enjoy conducting research on and educating the public about fossils and evolution. Jamie Brinkman has worked at the New York State Archives since 2018. She was a member of the Researcher Services Unit, where she assisted researchers from around the world and coordinated digitization of records. In spring of 2024, she became the Records Advisory Officer for New York State villages and cooperative extension schools, helping them with all things related to records management. Jamie has a Master's of Information Science from the University at Albany and previously worked at Harvard Law School Library and the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. So for those of you who have joined us today, welcome to you. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation, so you can feel free to submit your questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll be using that instead of the chat box today. So without further ado, I am pleased to introduce Lisa Amati and Jamie Brinkman.
All right, welcome everyone. I am hoping that you can see my screen. Thank you for joining us today. Like Josie said, my name is Jamie Brinkman. So today we'll be talking about Winifred Goldring, who was the first female state paleontologist anywhere in the United States. So we know from the title of the presentation, spoiler alert, that Winifred Goldring was the state paleontologist of New York. But who was she and how did she get to that point? So Goldring, an Albany native, enrolled in Wellesley College with an intended major in classical languages. A career in sciences was not in her plans. But this changed her freshman year when she took a botany class to meet a science course requirement. Shortly after, she switched tracks and majored in botany and ecology. She later took postgraduate courses in geology and paleontology to round things out. 2 years after graduating with her master's, Goldring was hired by the New York State Museum in 1914 as a scientific expert in paleontology. She completed a number of scientific studies during her decades at the museum, some of which Lisa will talk about in a few minutes. She consistently moved into positions of more authority and responsibility, and in 1939, she was appointed the state paleontologist of New York. She was the fourth person to serve as the state paleontologist. But not only was she the first woman to hold that title in New York, but she was the first woman to hold the title of state paleontologist anywhere in the world.
We know that Goldring studied botany, geology, ecology, and paleontology in college, but how did she apply what she learned? Goldring conducted research in both paleontology and geology, but she also had a passion for and a knack for explaining scientific topics in an interesting and easy to understand way. Goldring conducted research and we're going to explain her research in this presentation and also tell you about how she learned to take what she studied and explain it to the rest of the public. One of Goldring's first major assignments at the New York State Museum was to study crinoids. Crinoids, which are also called sea lilies, are animals that live in seas and oceans. Although they are relatively rare today, they were quite abundant in the shallows millions of years ago. Goldring was hired by the New York State Museum in 1914 as a scientific expert in paleontology, but specifically to design exhibits that would showcase and explain invertebrate fossils. 2 years later, though, the state paleontologist at the time, John Mason Clark, assigned Goldring a mammoth project. And by mammoth project, I don't mean mammoth the animal, I mean mammoth in that the project was a massive beast. Clark asked Goldring to study hundreds of specimens of sea lilies, like the ones that you can see on this screen, that had been collected over the past 50 years. With the specimens were countless pages of notes, maps, drawings, and all these data needed to be synthesized and then interpreted. Do we have the next slide? There we go. This slide shows one of the 155 species of crinoids Goldring described in great detail, and 58 of these were new to science. So that's what she'd been asked to do. In that publication, however, Goldring also interpreted the lifestyle and ecology of the organisms. She discussed their probable evolutionary relationships over time and assessed their stratigraphic relationships, or the order in which they occur in the layers of rock. The 670-page monograph was published 7 years later in 1923 as New York State Museum Memoir 16. This established her not only as an expert in crinoids, but also as a serious scientist. It demonstrated that she could accomplish a monumental task not only adequately, but exceptionally well. Goldring had been promoted to assistant paleontologist at the New York State Museum in 1917 when a quarry was opened along Schoharie Creek near Gilboa to provide material to build the Gilboa Dam. In this slide, you can see the dam under construction in the left side of the slide, and the right side of the slide shows the quarry that was opened called Riverside Quarry. Soon after the quarry was opened, Goldring learned that dozens of fossil tree stumps like those seen here were being discovered and removed from Riverside Quarry. While these fossil stumps had been known to exist since 1869, quarrying operations were unearthing a scientific treasure trove of tree fossils. And what's more, they were still standing on the fossilized floor of the forest. So they were still in the position in which they had lived. Having solidified her position at the New York State Museum with her crinoid monograph, Goldring was the lead research scientist at Gilboa. Over the next few years, she and her small team collected thousands of pounds of plant fossils, ranging from giant tree stumps like that on the left, which she named Eospermatopterus, to small pieces of foliage pressed between layers of rock, like the other fossils on this slide. Train car after train car made its way to the New York State Museum in Albany, where Goldring conducted her painstaking studies. Before Riverside Quarry was filled back in, Goldring also studied the geology of the preserved fossil forest floor and the layers of rock above that contained the fossils. By collecting data from every possible source using different scientific fields, Goldring was able to work with renowned exhibit designer Henri Marchand to create a realistic reconstruction of the living forest. That's what's shown here. This is a combination between reconstructions of the trees and actual fossils. This was on display at the old New York State Museum in what is now the Education Building starting in 1924. And as a side note, the red square that you'll see animate in is the exact same stump that Goldring used at her exhibit that we're going to be using in our upcoming exhibits at the new New York State Museum. Today, After 101 years after Goldring's first publication on Gilboa, we have new fossil finds, like the image on the left, and a better understanding of geology to aid us in reimagining the fossil forest. However, if you compare what we know today with what Goldring published, it is clear that her interpretations were mostly spot on. Because most fossils are found preserved in rock or sediment, geology and paleontology go hand in hand, and most paleontologists are trained in geology departments. Now imagine that you were a paleontologist and you were studying fossil plants like the ones that were found at Riverside Quarry in Gilboa. Only the quarry at Gilboa has been filled back in. You can't get any more material from there. What are you going to do now? Well, one way to tackle this problem is to look for other locations near Gilboa that have rocks exposed at the surface that are the same age as those at Gilboa. In 2025, we would use a geologic map like the one on the slide to locate the appropriate rock outcrops. Geologic maps provide information about the area at the Earth's surface where rock units of different ages are exposed. In Goldring's day, however, a geologic map was sometimes needed but didn't exist. In that case, you had to explore the surrounding area to find the rocks of the right age that might contain the fossils that you're looking for. And while you're at it, you may as well make the map you needed. The portion of a map shown on the left side of this slide was annotated by Goldring. It was published as a topographic map, which shows how the surface of the land is shaped. In the red box on the lower part of the map, it shows brown lines connecting points of equal elevation. Goldring used colored pencils to draw on the topographic map, and you can see the colored pencil markings in the upper yellow box. What she did was she looked at the rocks in that area and colored them different colors depending on the rock unit that she was able to identify. The image on the right side of the page is a page from Goldring's field notebook showing notes she took while doing the mapping. So she would use the pages like those on the right to add to the map that she was making on the left. Now, to make this map, Goldring spent weeks hiking up and down steep trails, following railroad tracks, and exploring the edges of streams, looking for places where the rock would outcrop so that she could identify the rocks and indicate their location on the map. Goldring often traveled in the sidecar of a motorcycle that was driven by her assistant, Clint Kilfoyle. And we have records from the archives that shows that she requested a revolver permit in 1931 so that she could protect herself when she was alone in the field.
Goldring had many accomplishments throughout her career and was a respected expert amongst her peers. She corresponded with scientists around the world, but she was also passionate about making New Yorkers interested in paleontology and geology. You can see this woven into her decades of work in the State Museum, starting with what is a fossil? In the early 20th century, the museum's paleontology staff had installed a series of exhibits in the Hall of Invertebrate Paleontology. They received positive comments from scientists and other academics, but they noticed a much different reaction from museum visitors. In fact, at one point, museum staff observed that it was, quote unquote, not flattering to have a group of persons enter the hall, give a quick look around, and say, "Let's go out. There's nothing but dead things in here." A change in presentation was needed. Enter Goldring's experimental exhibit. In 1926, the What is a Fossil exhibit was innovative at the time for its combination of technical and simplified language. There was, quote unquote, very full explanatory labels accompanying all examples. But for those who wish to spend less time, there are subheadings with the specimens, which are the full title label, permit to gain something from these cases with a quick survey. May I add, Goldring is way beyond her time, considering the average attention span of today's adult is 8 to 12 seconds. So she understood the need to capture attention quickly. Visitors, both professional and scientists and the general public, can learn about what a fossil is, how a fossil is preserved, and the effect of conditions on preservation upon the original form. But Lisa could probably explain what that means a little bit better than I could.
So you can see from this slide that there are two types of fossils. We have body fossils that show what the physical form of an animal, and trace fossils, which are things like tracks, trails, and burrows that show the behavior of an organism. But there are also two ways of appreciating fossils. One way to appreciate fossils is to treat them as a rare collectible item. The other way to appreciate fossils is to treat them as a physical clue or a puzzle piece to reconstructing the Earth's past. The second way of appreciating fossils is what Goldring was intent on conveying to museum visitors. Most museums during Goldring's time, and the New York State Museum was no exception, showcased large numbers of specimens, each with a label. But a label bearing the scientific name of a fossil organism doesn't tell you anything about how the animal lived or its role in an ancient ecosystem. So instead of just showing items, Goldring's museum exhibits attempted to explain why and how fossils are interesting and the significance of what visitors were seeing on display. Today, the New York State Museum is preparing new exhibits, and one of them is very similar to Goldring's What is a Fossil exhibit because it was brilliant in her time and it's still useful today.
So Goldring's successful experiment bringing paleontological knowledge to the masses was soon copied by other museums, starting with the Peabody Museum of Natural History at Yale University, one of the oldest and largest natural history museums in the world. I didn't realize the uniqueness and reach of this exhibit that it had in the museum world until I came across a quote in a book review in a 1930 issue of the American Midland Naturalist, and it really hammers it home. So that is why there is so much text on this slide. I apologize. Quote unquote, to paleontologist, Miss Goldring is known for her able research on Devonian plants and invertebrates. To museologists, she is familiar as the originator of the famous What is a Fossil exhibit in the New York State Museum, an exhibit which many of them, including the present reviewer, have undertaken to reproduce in other institutions. So Goldring herself built upon this success in two ways. First, she installed a similar exhibit called What is a Geological Formation the following year. And then she also used the two exhibits as the foundation and inspiration for two handbooks. They are the Handbooks of Paleontology for Beginners and Amateurs, Part 1, The Fossils, which was published in 1929, and then Part 2, The Formations, published 2 years later in 1931. Her desire to make science accessible was no longer going to be contained by the museum walls. It was going global. So the handbooks, which I mentioned before, were published in 1929 and 1931, were amplifications of the What is exhibits. They described fossils and geological formations with an emphasis on New York State. In addition to descriptions, Goldring included a large number of illustrations too, as she understood visual aids would be great help to beginners.
So why were these publications important? You can go almost anywhere in the United States and you're going to find groups of people who get together to discuss, trade, and collect fossils and rocks. Now, imagine how much more prevalent this was having geological hobbies back before streaming television and YouTube and video games. There were less indoor things to do. Most people collected fossils just as oddities, but Goldring's publications aided in her campaign to transform fossils from postage stamps to once living things. that, if you can read them, record a sentence within the story of ancient life. Goldring communicated with colleagues all over the world, from Canada to Peru and from Sweden to Australia. After publication of the handbooks, she also heard from people ranging from international scholars to local school teachers.
Yeah, we had gone through Goldring's correspondence, looking at correspondence she had received from people from across the world that were praising her handbook. It made a really big impact on people who were studying it. My favorite might be one of the letters on here that were from a local school teacher for Goldring. She was writing to say that they had a handbook in their classroom because she had students frequently bringing in fossils, and they were using the book to try to identify them. So some true beginners. So within 5 years of its 1929 publication, Handbook Part 1, The Fossils, stock of 2,000 copies was exhausted. After years of buying copies at secondhand bookstores to send to requesters, a revised edition of Part 1 was published in 1951. Additionally, an education leaflet was created by the State Museum using text from the Part 1 of the Handbook Fossils as a free resource for teachers. The leaflet not only made the science even more accessible by making it child-friendly, it included a coloring page for visual learning as well. You can see on the screen there's screenshots from both of those. Maybe we can reprint those, huh? Lisa, for museum visitors.
It's actually already been done.
Oh, nice. You learned something new. So early on in her career, Winifred Goldring had realized the importance of making a complex field like paleontology and geology more accessible to New Yorkers. It was something that she learned if she could share her passion and make that passion more accessible to people, that it could spark an interest in those particular fields like paleontology and geology with everyday New Yorkers. So she spent part of her decades-long career making sure that the State Museum's fossils could live. Right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I think now we can open it up for Q&A.
Yes. So thank you so much. What a great presentation, and what I just think Winifred Goldring is so cool, and I love her in that picture of her in the sidecar.
Me too.
So those of you who have questions out there, feel free to send them in now. Our first question is, how did she obtain funding for her research and her projects?
Oh,
Emily?
how did she get funded? A lot of the research projects that paleontologists at the New York State Museum undertook were paid for by the State Museum. So she would have submitted a budget, at before the start of the new fiscal year, and would have outlined the research she was going to do and what she would need to be able to do it. Fortunately, in many fields of geology and many parts of paleontology, but not all, it doesn't cost that much. If you're traveling within state, oftentimes we camp, so you're not even paying for a hotel. Rock hammers don't cost that much, and they don't need to be repurchased every season. So we can often do simple field work without spending a lot of money. If you have to do geochemical analyses, then you're starting to talk about needing major funding. But Goldring wouldn't have needed that much to produce massive amounts of excellent research.
Yeah, and in her correspondence that the State Archives has, you can kind of trace her getting approval for projects and her proposing them throughout the correspondence. There are some copies of correspondence back and forth with the museum director of the time, who probably would have been in charge of the overall budget for the agency.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that we make that clear. Jamie, how are you getting this information about what Winifred Goldring was
Oh,
doing?
sure. Yeah. So the state archives, in addition to the state museum, and Dr. Amati could give you more details about what they have in their collections. But the state archives has a few different collections related to Winifred Goldring, in addition to other state paleontologists that we've had, starting with Dr. Clark. We have her correspondence through pretty much her entire time here from like 19 I think it was 1916 it starts up into her retirement in 1954. It is just a treasure trove of items. Like, she sends her own critiques back of, somebody had gone through and written a report of the museum and how they could improve it, and she, like, counterpointed every single thing they said. And this is basically, well, actually we are doing these things. But at one point she was also corresponding with somebody who was incarcerated in Attica, who had an interest in fossils and rocks. And she corresponded with him about items that he would find, I think. And he actually, when he was being released, directed her towards corresponding with another incarcerated individual who he had inspired to take up the study. And like Lisa said, there was a letter about getting a revolver to protect herself in the field. I think it was like when she had to go through the courts. Um, as you can tell, I feel like there's a treasure trove in there. But we also have some photographs of hers, of a few of the sites that she did her studies at, but also a lot of images of fossils. Because she was using for the handbooks and other publications that she had at the time. But I know that the museum has a few different collections related to her as well.
We keep locating collections related to Winifred Goldring. So, for example, when I first got here in 2015, it was maybe 1 or 2 years later, I opened a drawer, and in the drawer of fossils, there was a map that she had, used colored pencils on to indicate different geological formations. And I don't know if anyone is aware, but you can't just take an antique piece of paper and jam it in a drawer full of rocks that might be off gassing. So we rescued it from the drawer and it's now properly housed. But we do occasionally find stuff like that. We also have four of the fossil cases. And instead of fossils in them, we have materials that record the history of the paleontology collection. So old little sample bottles and Winifred Goldring's ruler and drawing that she made of one of the Eospermatopterus trees, all sorts of interesting things. And most of it is properly housed and together in one area, but we do occasionally stumble across errant materials that are not housed properly or where they can be located again. So we're still finding stuff, but we hope that will end soon and we'll have everything together in one spot.
Great. So this next question I think is a really good and important question, and I'm not sure if we're able to answer it or not. But did Winifred Goldring ever experience any sort of uncomfortable moments with colleagues about her being a woman? Was she looked down on in the field, or were people welcoming?
There, one of our collection managers who retired worked on a biography of Winifred Goldring, and there are a lot of stories, and I don't know how much she's been able to confirm and how much was just rumor, but she was able to confirm that at one point Goldring had left the New York State Museum for a leave of absence, and she was supposed to have been sick. Now, at one point, she actually was and took a leave of absence because of illness. But apparently, one of the leave of absences that she took was blamed on illness. But there is evidence to suggest that she had walked out because she was making less than the cleaners There was also a story that she was told that she could call herself the state paleontologist, but she wasn't, but she really was. And there are a number of letters that Jamie had come across in the archives that where she discusses, issues that she'd had. But I'll let Jamie talk about that more.
Yeah, there's two examples that come to mind. At one point, somebody was doing a study of women in the paleontology and geology fields and asked her for her opinion, and it was her. We actually have a copy of her opinion, which can be hit or miss on when you have somebody's outgoing correspondence, mostly incoming correspondence. But she didn't paint a pleasant picture of how it was to be a woman in the field of paleontology and geology. She felt like it was hard to break in and hard to be a woman in a field that was mainly dominated by men. I believe she also mentioned in that letter that a lot of women were kind of discouraged from certain types of roles within it, and that it wasn't even worth applying because they weren't going to get it. Another one that comes to mind, we have another exchange. She was attempting to go on an expedition. I think it was one that was being coordinated by another organization. I believe it was going to be South America or Central America. And she wrote this scathing letter to the person saying how essentially boils down to how dare you exclude me because I'm a woman. I have every right to be there. I am a paleontologist. I want to go for this scientific study. And the person apologized profusely. And I can't wish I could remember whether she went or not, but she did have to stick up for herself and say, I belong there just as much as anyone else if I'm willing to pay. So.
Okay, great. So the next question is kind of about the records themselves. Specifically, the question is about, was there any correspondence between Goldring and the Museum of Natural History in New York City that's in those records and potentially digitized? But more broadly, is there a finding aid to those records?
So there is, I think there might be a container list available, but it's more the collection of correspondence is arranged chronologically. So there's folders that are labeled, 1929 A through K, and then there's another folder that's 1929, the next rest of the letters. um, Unfortunately, it's not like as granular as by person or by letter item, so it would require a little bit of digging to see if there was. She was corresponding with people all over the world. I mean, she was talking to people in other countries, other museums. She has a few postcards from scientists from Japan. So you would have a little bit of digging would be required to see and confirm whether she was corresponding with somebody from that particular museum. Unfortunately, we don't have these items digitized. But we're always happy to create copies for researchers if they find something of interest that they want to see.
And so I guess we'll give a little plug here for how you get in touch with the reference desk.
Yeah, absolutely. On our screen, I've included the information for our excellent researcher services staff. They have the email, which you can correspond and provide information about what you're looking for. If you're looking for the Winifred Goldring correspondence, you can ask them about that. You can also give them a call if that's what you prefer. And then if you would like to find the finding aid for that collection, you could visit our website. We have a web page that is a searchable database for our finding aids. So if you popped in the phrase Winifred Goldring, you would likely find the collections related to her that the archives holds.
So these next questions are about fossils. So I think these will go to you, Lisa.
Lisa, all you.
Well, somebody is sort of reminiscing about their introduction to fossils was collecting trilobites along the railroad bed in the Adirondacks. where they had used crushed stone from upstate New York to maintain the railroads. Have you worked on any upstate New York fossils, and where are the main beds located?
I've worked on fossils that are Cambrian and Ordovician in age from upstate. I could tell you where the fossil beds are located, but you would be disappointed. Uh, Basically, I'm trying to think. There are very few places in New York in the Ordovician where you can find complete trilobites. Usually, what happens is they're when they die, they fall apart, and then you just find like you find a head and you find a tail and you find part of the middle. If you're looking for types of fossils that are not trilobites, things like brachiopods are more likely to you're more likely to find them complete. And um, I can't. It's hard to tell anybody where the fossil beds are located because anywhere where there's sedimentary rock in New York State, which is most of it, there are going to be fossils. So it depends on the age of the fossils you're interested in, the type of fossil you're interested in, as to where you go. So I guess in summary, I do study some Cambrian and some Ordovician trilobite fossils from New York State. I haven't published much on them because I tend to write monographs. So my current paper that I'm working on is 84 pages single spaced. So yeah, takes a little bit to get those out. I've taken for the another paper that I'm working on, I've taken probably maybe 600 images, and each image takes a while to like actually get the photograph taken. And I work on massive projects, and when they come out, they will show you maps, tell you where to go to find the fossils, but you know, it takes a little time.
Sounds like a process. Um, so the handbooks that she wrote for amateur paleontologists, and I know I've heard from a lot of people that they use those or growing up. Are those still in print, or do we know?
I'm not sure. I don't believe so. I think they're pretty much.
Not gold.
What
What
was
was
that?
Gold
that?
rings are not.
Yeah, no, I don't think they are. It would be pretty much what you can find at secondhand shops online or in person. And then I think, if I remember correctly, there are digitized versions online as well. So it lives on.
And with regard to the biography, Lisa, that you mentioned, was that ever published, or is it in the works to be?
Not yet.
Okay. So
Not yet.
forthcoming.
But I do remember there is a place where you can go and collect fossils legally. It is just south of Buffalo. It's called Penn-Dixie Fossil Park and Nature Preserve, I think, but it's PENN dash Dixie. And it's not very much money that you have to pay. It's a nonprofit. You pay, a small amount of money for you and your family to go in, and it's this big open space full of rock. It's an old quarry, and you walk around and just pick through the rocks, and you can just pick up fossils. And they do occasionally find complete trilobites there, as well as brachiopods, corals, bryozoa. I believe there are snails. Yeah, tons of fossils there. It's legal. It only costs a little bit of money. It's fun. The people are nice. They help you interpret what it is that you found. So I highly recommend going there if you're interested in collecting your own fossils.
That sounds fun. One of our guests actually has popped in to let us know that the handbooks are available. Well, at least they had seen them released in 2021 on thriftbooks.com, new copies. So not to place an ad for thriftbooks.com, and I can't confirm or
Wait,
deny.
new copies?
Maybe it's when a book is goes and enters the public domain, you can get
Oh,
printed copies of
right.
Okay, and then do we know whether she had any collaboration or correspondence with Alfred Wegener regarding his continental drift theory?
I can't say for certain if I've seen anything in the correspondence. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Somebody also has mentioned if it's of any interest.
You probably knew who was.
Oh, did you say Google? Uh-oh, is Lisa
Uh-oh.
frozen? Okay.
Lisa, you cut out a little bit.
Yeah.
I didn't hear a question. I didn't hear a question.
Okay, well, you were just suggesting Googling things.
Uh,
Is that what you? Okay, well, that's I don't think it was crucial. Um, but somebody also mentioned, and I don't know if either of you knew that, but apparently Winifred is buried with family members at the back of the cemetery behind the New Scotland Presbyterian Church, in headed toward Voorheesville.
Okay.
That sounds a nice place to be buried.
yep.
Yeah,
we've been meaning to take a field trip.
Okay. So I also, Lisa, I think we're going to wrap up here because I think we've gotten through all the questions, but you mentioned an upcoming museum exhibit, and people were interested in hearing about that and when it opens, etc.
We are planning on renewing a large portion of the museum, but we don't have a timeline yet.
The State Museum is always a great place to go, to bring your family. It's a great day, for everyone. There's something of interest for everyone there. So, highly recommend it. So I think we've gotten through all the questions. So I just want to say thank you so much to both of you for joining us today. This was a great presentation. I loved hearing, about Winifred, and I think our audience members did as well. And thank you to everyone who joined us as an audience member. If you're interested in learning more about any of the Winifred Goldring records, you're going to visit archives.nysed.gov, and that URL is right up on your screen. If you're interested in learning more about what we do at the Archives Partnership Trust, we are at nysarchivestrust.org. It's our privilege to make these events available to you and to keep New York State's history alive. If you're interested in the content we create and you have ideas for future programming, send us an email at aptrust@nysed.gov. And don't forget to join us on Tuesday, April 8th at 12:30 p.m. for our next online speaker series, Conflict, Commerce, and Cooperation, John Bown, Petrus Stuyvesant, and the Question of Tolerance in 1660s New Amsterdam. You can find out more about that program and register for it for free at nysarchivestrust.org. And for all of our attendees today, you will also be receiving a thank you email that will have a link to that program's registration, and this program's recording, because this program will be recorded and available on our YouTube page. So Lisa, Jamie, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today.